60 post-game show. I'm your host, John Serenitas. And as always, I'm joined by my partner, John Lyons, back in Boston, and Kevin Stone. Gentlemen, didn't go as planned tonight. Patriots lose to the Seattle Seahawks 29-13 in a game. John Lyons, that, quite frankly, I think calling it ugly might be a disservice to the word ugly. Just some initial thoughts on this one. And then, Kevin, I want to get your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, this was a game that basically from start to finish, the Patriots' offensive line was totally overwhelmed. And I think it bled into Drake May's play as well. And a lot of the things, John and Kevin, you and I have been talking about for 8 or 9 months now with the Patriots' offense finally kind of showed up to bite them, whether it was the lack of the high-end weapons, the inexperience on the left side of the offensive line, May's tendency to turn the ball over, which he had been largely good about this year for the most part. And it came together against, and you got to give credit to Seattle. Awesome defense, great team. Seattle played their best game defensively of the year, and the Patriots offensively also didn't play well. It was just a bad combination of things, unfortunately. And you got to give the Seahawks credit, but you said it, just a ugly night for the Patriots offense and a crash landing for what was a really fun season overall.
Uh, Look, you feel bad for the defense first and foremost. At least I do. It's 12-0 at one point. You're still in that game. It's just, you guys both said it. You had nothing going on offense, and John and I were talking throughout the game. The conversation now it's two things. It's going to be, well, is Bill Campbell a guard, and how much blame does Josh McDaniels start to get? I think that's the two things. Whether right or wrong, that's what you're going to now hear for at least a week or so. So I think those are the two biggest questions. Offensively, I think receiver is now a question. And look, we're not that far away from the draft. You're going to have to start to look ahead at what this team needs. And John, I know you believe edge rusher is still, a major need, and it is. But offensively, you need to add some pieces here.
Yeah, we got, but we need a lot more. And I think that's really what it comes down to. And John, you and I, it's well documented that you and I have been staunch supporters of Josh McDaniels. We supported the hire. We liked the hire. And look, it's not going to diminish my view of the hire. But what did you see tonight? From a coaching standpoint, I thought to me, and I almost feel like this is too simplistic to say, I almost felt like they weren't prepared. I really didn't get a real sense of what the game plan was. They came out early on, tried to run the football. They were able to do that the first couple possessions. Then they fell behind, and you're only down 3-0. They go away from it inexplicably for whatever reason. It just seemed to me like all night long they were chasing. They were throwing stuff against the wall, hoping something would stick. Ultimately, they really couldn't get anything to stick. But for the first time this season, I can honestly say that as someone who's been a supporter of Josh McDaniels this season, I think he has to bear a lot of the responsibility here tonight. This was not a good plan, and the Patriots, to me, looked unprepared.
Yeah, it's interesting because the Patriots coaching staff, I think, has done a terrific job this year, but there are some real questions you could ask. I'd even go to Mike Vrabel not going for 2 when they got that first touchdown to go down 19-6, could have made it 19. I question little things like that. And look, on the McDaniels point, when your offensive line is totally overwhelmed by 4 rushers, it's tough to do anything, right? We've seen that before. We saw that with the 2007 Patriots offense in the Super Bowl. But one thing I did kind of just stuck in my mind, John, and I'm curious to both your guys' thoughts on this. We talked all season about how good Ramondre Stevenson was as a pass blocker. Can't think of a play I really saw that have an impact tonight. And I think that's something you look back on, especially with the struggles on the left side of that offensive line, that you didn't have really any snaps for Stevenson to pass block. I would have gone to the screen game at some point in this one. I would have tried too. It didn't feel like they ran enough.
Not to cut you off, John, and I'm glad you brought that up. We talked about this probably, 3 weeks ago, about how ineffective their screen game has been this season. How traditionally, when you go back to the dynasty years, this was a heavy screen team under Josh McDaniels. That wasn't the case this year, especially when it comes to perimeter screens and trying to get the ball out quick. Tonight would have been a night where you probably could have used some of that stuff. To your point in bringing it up, we didn't see it.
Yeah, and you have a guy in Travion Henderson that has been a good screen back, and at least in his college days he was. You have a guy in Demario Douglas and Stephon Diggs that have been good screen players, excuse me, in their previous NFL careers. And I would also say too, there wasn't and look, some really easy completions. He had a couple misses on third down to Booty, to Hollins. He had a couple bad misses to Austin Hooper, one on a rollout, another on a blown coverage, but I didn't see a lot of like get enough getting guys on the move. Like Kyle Williams was not a factor in this game. I would have liked to have seen put him in motion, run a shallow route, get an easy completion with him. They used to do that with Edelman all the time, including against the Seahawks in the Super Bowl 11 years ago. Not that it's the same defense, but it just, yeah, I mean, it was just so many things went wrong. So I agree with you. I think McDaniels deserves some blame, but I think the root of it all is when you can't block four guys up front, it's tough to really get anything going anywhere. But again, there was certainly some criticisms in there for him.
A couple other things on offense too. One, from our vantage point, we were in the end zone. Receivers could not get open all night long. There was a few plays where there was some separation and Drake would miss a throw, but overall, I think you need to really look at that group. And then Drake admitted tonight that shoulder was shot up. Now I was asking John, on the walk over here, what could that be? And we don't want to speculate. Obviously, it's not the time to do it, but that's going to affect anybody. They played it off well for 2 weeks. I came into this game assuming he was perfectly fine. I was standing to his right, I believe, post game. You could see the Band-Aid where the needle went in. So he was not 100% by any means. It's not an excuse, but clearly a factor because he missed a lot of throws tonight too.
No, but to John's point, I mean, again, and I think it's a great point. You're not going to win this game if you can't pass block against a four-man rush. You're just not. This offensive line gave up 21 sacks this postseason. You're not going to win a Super Bowl with an offensive line that has played that poorly. And coming into the playoffs, when you start to think long-term and look ahead to the offseason, I kept saying, I think they need to get a guy that can come off the edge, that can generate more consistent pressure. Chason was a nice story. Landry wasn't the same player after he got off to a strong start when he got hurt in New Orleans. But now, John, I think you have to pivot here. I think now the conversation has to shift in terms of offseason needs. And I think offensive line now moves up to that number one need, in my opinion, specifically offensive tackle. Kevin and I have talked about this the last half hour or so, and I want to get your take on this. Would it be too soon to consider moving Will Campbell to left guard? Or do you need to give him one more offseason, get him in your weight program, see if he gets stronger, see if he develops physically, and give him another shot at left tackle next year, and then potentially you make that decision?
Yeah, and to your first point, I think one thing you did learn tonight is you have a defense that is good enough to win the Super Bowl. Like they gave up 22 points on defense.
You tweeted that out, and I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah, so all right, I still want an edge rusher and an impact one, but at least your defense is in that neighborhood and can do it. And this is the way I look at the O-line, John, is I think Onwenu is legit established starter. I think Moses will be here next year, but again, he's a mid-30s guy. You don't know how much longer he's going to be around. I think what you need to do is find a legit veteran upgrade either at center, guard, or tackle. And what I mean by that is if it's guard, then you can move Jared Wilson to center and you have a legit vet next to Campbell. If it's tackle, you can move Campbell to guard, Wilson to center. And if it's center, you can have an upgrade over Garrett Bradbury. But I think you need if we saw that left side of the O-line, and I'll include Bradbury in that because, he slides to the left at times with those guys, just was not good enough in multiple games this year. Frankly, John, and I think you would agree, they weren't good enough on the left side to beat Houston either. And they did because C.J. Stroud threw 5 picks, and you had the great throw and catch from May to Booty on that touchdown. But the left side of your O-line wasn't good enough to beat Houston. And if we're being honest with ourselves, and we talked about this the day after the AFC Championship game, if Bo Nix plays that game, your offense wasn't good enough to win that game either. And I'm not trying to be Mr. Negativity here, but I think it sends your defense gave up 7 points in the AFC Championship game and you struggled to win. Your defense gave up 22 points in the Super Bowl. In the fourth quarter, they were at 19 and you couldn't get anything going. So yeah, I would be open to moving Will Campbell, but I'm also if they can go out and find an all-pro level guard and they keep Campbell at tackle next to an all-pro, I'm okay with that as well.
Lauren Gaudette checks in front of the show. She says basically every single issue that the Pats had all year showed up all at once. O-line wasn't good. May couldn't fix it. Receivers never got open. I couldn't have said that better myself. I said to Stone and some people where we were sitting, I said, look, the lemons run dry here. You got every last drop of milk out of the cow. I think all their flaws rose to the forefront tonight. The left side, which we know as people, the three of us who cover this team throughout the year and we focus on them, we knew that the left side was a problem. And it had been a problem all year. It's just that at times Campbell played well early on before he got hurt. You thought to yourself, okay, he could be the guy potentially. Turns out that was fool's gold. And this isn't pile on Will Campbell tonight because Jared Wilson had his fair share of struggles as well in this game and this season for that matter. But to Lauren's point, I think especially on offense, everything that was wrong with this football team that we knew could be a potential problem came back to bite him in the ass tonight. The poor pass protection. To Kevin's point, receivers couldn't get open. May held the ball. Certainly part of that could be that he was hurt. But I think the other part of it is, John, and you know this, we both have coached, when your quarterback gets hit a lot, he tends to lock in on certain receivers. He doesn't work through his progression as quick. He's seeing the rush more. You could see that with May tonight. I do think it's an important point that I want to make here, though. This is a young football team. As much as we want to point to all the free agents they brought in and how a bunch of those guys are vets, this is a young football team, and it really showed up tonight.
Yeah, and not to get too far ahead of ourselves, guys, but like I wouldn't be surprised if we look at next year and they're a better football team, but they win fewer games because their schedule is going to be so much tougher. Yeah, and the reason I say that is I wholeheartedly agree, John, in that you're looking at a second-year QB, and it's his first time working with this coach and OC, two rookies on the O-line. I mean, Craig Woodson was maybe the second best player on the Patriots tonight behind Christian Gonzalez, and he's a rookie. And even Gonzalez, who we look at as a vet, and I know I've said this before, this was still only his third year. Like, so there's so many guys that are younger guys that are either not in their prime yet or just entering. And I think now it comes down to their player development program, because we know development's not magical and it's not linear. They're going to have to put the work in. What's their player development program? We've seen Elliott Wolf have one really bad draft and one really good draft. What is the real Elliott Wolf? Is he going to have another good draft, another good free agency? I hope so, to build on this, because the other side of this coin, it was an awesome season. I'm not taking anything away, but you got to think next year, right? Buffalo might be better. I think Cincinnati will be better. I think Baltimore will be better. We'll see about Pittsburgh. Like the path in the AFC is not like the Chargers aren't going to lose both starting offensive tackles again next year. Like the path is not going to be quite what it was. You know, you're not going to play an AFC championship game backup quarterback next year. So I think they have to get better. Like they took advantage and played well enough to get to the Super Bowl, but they're going to have to play at a higher level if they're going to get back there next year or the year after.
John, you brought this up earlier tonight during the game, and both of you, I want to get your opinion on this. With the receivers struggling so badly to get open, why not try rolling Drake out more and getting that pocket moving?
Well, I don't think I think that's a valid question. I think the issue is their edge. Here's the thing about this defense that makes them hard to play against.
Yeah, you're saying.
Yes.
Yeah.
And John brought this up earlier. They're only really bringing 4. Sometimes they'll bring 5. On occasion, they'll bring 6. But when you look at their blitz percentage, going into the playoffs, it was amongst the lowest in the league. Okay, they're not a defense. McDonald has always been a guy. He is more to front variance, trying to create matchups through fronts, just like the Patriots, big TE guy. But it's still going to be a 4 or 5 man pressure. They're not going to sell out and play a bunch of man. They played more zone than man during the regular season and into the playoffs. Of course, a big topic of conversation this week was cover 6 and how's Drake May going to do against cover 6 and all this other stuff. I think at the end of the day, what this comes down to is, and I know this is going to sound simplistic, the reason why I think you couldn't bootleg him or sprint him out or do more in terms of moving the pocket for him is it wasn't going to matter. They were better up front. They whooped you up front.
Yeah. That
defensive line kicked the Patriots' offensive line's ass tonight. You want an example of it? How about when Jared Wilson gets run over and gives up a sack in the first half? And I'm not picking on Jared Wilson. Love talking to the kid. He's mature beyond his years. I think he's going to be really good, probably at center long term. But when you look at him at left guard, he was overmatched tonight. And going into this game, and John, you mentioned this, I've talked about it, this game was going to be won and lost up front. And I know you could pretty much say that about every game in football, but more so this one. Because if your offensive line and your defensive line collectively didn't outplay theirs, you were going to lose. And that's what happened tonight. Their defensive line outplayed your offensive line, and your offensive line didn't outplay, and their offensive line, while they didn't outplay your defensive line, they did enough to keep Sam Darnold upright, and he made some plays in the passing game. But overall, I mean, we can sit here and talk about how they could have schemed this up. I told Stone I would have looked into some personnel and formation stuff. But, John, I think at the end of the day, and you know this, I'm sure you've been there in your career, when you're going up against somebody that you know is better, this is a hard sport to win in when the other team is better. It's the ultimate talent sport.
Yeah, and look, I agree with Stone. I think they should have done it more. But what I will say is the one time they did it, they had Austin Hooper wide open, and Drake May just threw it away. And so, like, I mean, it's like, again, I'm not saying to never do it again, but it's like you try it, the play's there, and it's still not executed. It was weird. And who would have thought, guys, too, that Sam Darnold had the better pocket presence and mobility tonight under pressure than Drake May. You got to give because we saw a lot of times Milton Williams eventually got the sack in the second half, but there was a lot of times where the Patriots had near sacks, near quarterback hits, and Darnold got out of it, and May did. And part of it is just the Patriots' offensive line was overwhelmed, but it's tough too because then it's like you can say, "Oh, try to run the ball," but like Stevenson had 7 carries for 23 yards, and Henderson had 6 for 19. So it's like you're averaging under 3.5 yards a carry with your 2 backs. Like it's again, I'm not trying to make excuses. It's just it's tough to really do it. They couldn't even dial up shot plays because May didn't have the time to throw. I mean, the 2 times he had time to throw, he threw what was a 35-yard touchdown to Hollins. Like but for most of the game, it wasn't there.
Yeah. Lauren checks back in. She says, John, you mentioned Campbell's injury. Was May playing hurt tonight? Well, Kevin addressed it. I mean, it looked to us, if you looked at his arm, his right arm, it looked like he got.
Well, he said he did.
He said he did.
Yeah.
Yeah. It looked like he got an injection. He said he did.
Yeah.
And then she says, how less than 100% more bunch of guys. Hey, look, and Lauren, you coach, you know this. People are going to be less than 100% this time of year. It's a fact of life. When you're playing in the final game of the season at any level of football, you're not healthy. Nobody is. You're just hoping to get your guys through it and that they do enough for you to win the game. And oftentimes, a lot of these guys are getting by on adrenaline, to be honest with you. So I don't think they were fully healthy. But then again, neither were the Seahawks. Nick Immanwori got hurt at practice this week. He wasn't 100% either. So,
and just to that
point, I think that goes both ways.
To that point, Drake May said it after the game. They've been at this for 307 days. That's insane. Like, if you think about it. And now the scary part is you have a quick turnaround. OTAs start in like 2 months. So if they weren't healthy, they have to get healthy pretty quickly.
Lauren then follows up and says, Pats had given up more sacks than Joe Burrow's Super Bowl run in 2021. Yeah. I think, it speaks to what now has become your number one priority this offseason, and that's fixing the offensive line. And, John, you mentioned this earlier about who could be here and who might not be here. I agree with you on Onwenu, but Onwenu is also due big money. This is going to be the final year of his contract. He is due big money. What do you do with Bradbury? Do you make that move now where you move Wilson to center and Bradbury's out potentially? You've got him in the fold for another year. So they've got some big decisions to make here, especially on veterans that are going into the final year of their contracts. Now, free agency-wise, as far as unrestricted free agents are concerned, your 2 big ones are Chason and Hawkins. Tonga is your other one. But I'd like to see Chason back. I've been very open about that. Same with Hawkins. Tonga, it is what it is. We'll see. But this is, if you could legitimately, you'll have about 42 million in cap space. But realistically speaking, my broader point here is I think they're going to run it back with most of this roster.
Yeah, and most of these guys, I mean, you mentioned it's just Hawkins, and Chason and Tonga, the UFAs. I mean, most of these other guys are under contract. So I look, and I would want to see Chason back. I'd want to see Hawkins back, as well. I thought Hawkins was really good for them this year. And I thought when he missed time early in the year, like I think back to that Saints game, you could tell the defense missed him when he wasn't in there. And it's the offensive line is interesting because I think when you look at it as a whole, they were better than last year and they were better than the year before. But as we saw in the postseason, still not good enough to be a championship level team. And that's where, again, you know, to me, it just comes down to, and it's kind of that old adage, and we talk about it on the draft a lot. What's the best available path? Like, is it get it? Like, is there a legit veteran guard available, and you move Wilson to center? Is it a legit tackle available, and you move Campbell and Wilson over? Like, I'm open to either one. And I think some of this too comes down to, does your quarterback get a little bit better under pressure? Because I know his numbers were good under pressure this year if you look at it statistically, but we saw there were times where he would get under pressure and not take checkdowns or get his feet would be skittish in the pot. Like, does he just naturally get a little bit better under pressure? And also, some of this is, do you have a better group of pass catchers that get open quicker so you can hit hot routes faster, which we saw for that, be able to do many years in the McDaniels offense. So I think like it's a group thing here in this. You can look at every level of this offense and say, hey, they need an upgrade. But I think, yeah, it's got to start with the O-line for sure.
Real quick before we respond to that, I want to come back to May. Are you guys concerned with the way he finished this season? Because when you look back to where he was during the regular season, obviously he was in the MVP conversation. Are you concerned with the way he played in the playoffs?
Yes, but I'm not like, oh my God, he's not the guy. I just think it's something that he's got to grow from and he's got to be better. Like if he plays at this level 2 years from now, then I'm going to be really worried. But it's, again, this was a team that won 4 games last year. There's obviously not a lot of depth and there's not a lot of high-end talent around him. He played great in the regular season and then mostly poorly in the playoffs, especially the final 2 games. But I don't look at that as like, oh, he's not the guy or it's some huge issue. I look at it as, can he build on it and grow? Because we even saw moments like we saw that flea flicker throw in the Denver game. We saw the couple throws to Holland's thing. Like you saw moments of it, just not enough. And I think it's an increase in comfort level needs to happen, especially not just in the offense, but with the protection. And he improved the turnovers this year. And then all of a sudden he kind of regressed a little in the last 3 games. Can he be more consistent about that over the course of an entire season and a playoff run?
I'm not, and only because I think you see that quality that he wants to get better. He will use this to fuel him. I'm not. The only thing I am worried about is down the road, if you don't put more around him, well, now you're looking at a situation where contract-wise, when it comes up, does he want to stick around? I know it's a ways away, but after a loss like this, when the pieces around him are not helping him out, you got to start to worry about that. But in terms of the talent and the want to get better, the desire to get better, I think he has all the qualities you need.
I was concerned, and I am concerned, and I'm not saying he's not potentially a franchise quarterback, but there were red flags to me in these playoffs that concerned me. Now, the protection sucked. We all agree with that. Like I said earlier, they gave up 21 sacks this postseason, so it is what it is. Protection's not good enough. That's where it starts. We could sit here and talk about the receivers all we want, but they were more than serviceable for the entire season. They got you to this point. So, yes, that's a need, but you had enough there that if you had to run it back with that group next year, I think you still might have enough. If Kyle Williams takes another step, he gives you that big play element. Pop takes another step, although it'll be year 4 for him. So how many more steps can he take? But I think for me with Drake, I think that there was some regression in the playoffs. You see it in terms of – some of it I think is a byproduct of him getting hit. But I do think you see it at times in terms of his pocket presence. He was holding on to the ball too long, blocking on reads too long. I think he took a step back. I think during the regular season he was an MVP candidate. He played at a high level, but I think in the playoffs, and again, part of it is the offensive line was not good. But I do think he took a step back. Now, all that being said, I still think he has the potential to be a franchise quarterback. I still think he's the best quarterback in that 2024 class. Some people now, I'm sure, will pivot nationally and they'll say, oh, no, it's Caleb Williams, Iceman cometh, and all this other stupid bullshit that they like to say. But I think in the end, you saw it tonight. And again, John, you know how important it is to be on the same page with his receivers. You guys mentioned that Hooper throw that he misses. Those are the little things, even though it's year 2, those are the little things you've got to be able to do no matter where you're at in your career if you want to be recognized as being elite and being amongst the best of the best. And so, I mean, again, I think, look, do we hit the panic button here? No, but there was definitely regression, in my opinion, in the playoffs. Old Man Willem joins us from Connecticut. He says, rough loss, glad we went this far this season, but a bitter ending. Vrabel did a great job with this team this year. Yeah, I think we would all agree with that. Chief Fetty joins the show. Thanks for checking in, man. He says, I'm happy with this season, but they could say that it's the schedule. I don't know. We will be back. Just got to get break a line.
So I'm glad you brought that up. 2 things I want to ask you guys. One, this is going to lend more credence to that schedule talk.
Oh, 100%.
Whether people like it or not, it sucks. 2, could that Drake regression just be because he's never played this deep into a season or played this long? I feel like that could sort of play into this as well.
Yeah, I think it's a factor. And one thing that I found interesting is that it felt like through a lot of the playoffs, May was almost too risk averse. And John, you know this. You want your quarterback to be careful. You want him to avoid turnovers. But he felt almost too risk averse. And then you get to the Super Bowl and there's 10 minutes left. You have the ball down 19-7 and he totally forces an interception. It was like he was almost trying to do too much and he was putting so much of the load on his shoulders to win the game on his own. And when they were winning games early in the year, like when they won in Buffalo, when they won in Tampa, when they won these games, yes, May was great in those games, but it wasn't like he was trying to put the whole game on himself. And it felt like in the postseason, there were moments that he tried to do that. And that's something that I think he's going to have to grow out of. It's the fine line between taking what's there and then taking that calculated risk to throw in a tight window to kind of make that extra play to win you a game. It just felt like that kind of calculation in his mind was mostly off this playoffs. Like that throw to Hunter Henry for the touchdown against the Chargers, that was one of those plays where he went after it and it worked. And the throw to Booty for the touchdown against Houston. But other than that, you didn't see enough of that. Again, you don't want to go too far. You don't want to be Brett Favre and blow games. But I think there's got to be a little bit more aggressiveness in his game sometimes. He's got to balance it out by also sometimes just taking what's there.
I think I said what I needed to say on him. I do think there was some regression there. But all that being said, he's a franchise quarterback. I think he's only going to get better. And I do think ultimately you're going to have to pay him. And when you end up paying him, that's going to impact how you build a roster around him. That's the reality of today's NFL. Once your quarterback gets to that point and he's in that 60, 70 million a year club, now you've got to do a better job of managing your cap and how you distribute your money. And I know a lot of people will say, yeah, but the cap keeps going up, blah, blah, blah. That's fine, but the quarterback still eats a good chunk of that. The Seattle Seahawks did teach us a lesson, though, in that you don't need – Sam Darnold played elite in the playoffs. He wasn't great tonight, but he was good enough. Darnold, for the most part, though, turnovers aside, had moments, especially coming into tonight, where he played at an elite level. But what they taught us this season is roster construction matters. If you build a team the right way through your defense, running the football, having that number one receiver that can take pressure off your quarterback in your running game, if you can build that type of team, you don't need a top 5 guy at the position. Sam Darnold is not a top 5 quarterback in this league. But if you pair him with the right offensive coordinator who plays to his strengths, he fits the system, he has the requisite pieces around him, you can win with a guy that's top 10, top 15, which Darnold is. And I think at the end of the day, that's what you saw tonight. So to a degree, and I know people are going to say, what is this guy talking about? He's such a bloviator. To a degree, I'm not saying you don't need a franchise quarterback, but you don't need a franchise quarterback if your roster construction is appropriate. To go back to your point about the schedule, yeah, I look, there's nothing you can do about it. The bottom line is that Vrabel said this tonight, I spent the entire time I was in the at the podiums with Vrabel. He said it tonight. He said, "Look, at the end of the day, you know what? You play who they put in front of you, but the bottom line is this was the best team they played all year, and it showed." So I think, yeah, the schedule. People are going to point to that and say, "See, people in New York are going to be saying this shit all week. See, Drake May is the worst Super Bowl quarterback in however many years, and this is the worst Super Bowl team in however many years." Bottom line is this: the Seahawks were better than we thought they were. To quote the late great Dennis Green, we thought we knew who they were, but they were better ultimately than we thought they were.
So,
yeah, and I guess to quote Dennis Green, you can go ahead and crown him too, right? But like everything that you just said about Sam Darnold and the Seahawks, you could say about Jalen Hurts and the Eagles last year too. Like he had a
Bingo.
great run, but he's not a top 10 or top 15 guy. And look, let's be honest, you want a top 5 QB. And I think May this year was a top 5 QB in the regular season. And I think we saw in the playoffs when he regressed and he was more of a top 15, top 20 guy, the supporting cast around him was not enough to make up the difference. Now, with another off season, could they get to that point and could he be better in the playoffs? I think the answer is yes. But I mean, I think we knew going into the playoffs, if they were going to win a Super Bowl, they needed May to play like an MVP candidate. And he had some of those moments. I mentioned that the Chargers game and a couple passes in the Houston game, but on the whole, he wasn't. And then tonight, he didn't play well. But again, go back to the very first thing we said on this show, guys. Seattle was fantastic. They're a great team, and they had a great night, and they got pressure with 4 guys. You put all that together, and the Pats offense was just totally overwhelmed tonight. And it's something they have to look at when they when they go into building the roster out this offseason.
I don't want to take anything away from Seattle, but the whole Road Warriors thing tonight, and we were not in every road game. That was a Seahawks home game tonight.
Oh, yeah.
It was definite.
70-30 Seahawks fans for sure.
At times. So they didn't handle it well. Plain and simple. They didn't handle the environment very well at all. I think that played a huge factor in tonight as well.
I think the other thing with Seattle, and this is where I give Mike McDonald so much credit, is if you look at the last 2 weeks and the build up to this game, the emphasis was on the Patriots. The focus was on the Patriots. Can they win their 7th? Mike Vrabel, the job he's done this year, turning them around after basically only 2 losing seasons, ends up winning NFL Coach of the Year. Mike Vrabel. But I think at the end of the day, the Seahawks wanted it that way. The focus wasn't on them. The conversation was all about the Patriots and Vrabel and May and the nickname and Michael and all this other stuff. And that whole time, the Seahawks were lurking in the weeds. They were just sitting there practicing, getting ready, doing their thing, and then they let their game do the talking. And that's a championship caliber football team. And I can't tip my hat enough to John Schneider and McDonald for the job they did this season because the league was wide open. And I think they saw that this offseason. They recognized it, and I think that they pounced. And you could say the same thing about the Patriots, but the difference is Seattle financially didn't go all in. They had been building to this point, and then they added some of those pieces, a couple of those pieces in free agency. They had Eamon Warrior on defense, Gray Zabel at left guard. Those 2 guys were huge impact rookies, and they put together a team that can win. I say they didn't spend. They went out and they gave Sam Darnold a $100 million contract. They didn't spend to the level that the Patriots did, is my point. But nonetheless, they spent, but they were building to this point, and it all came together. And that's a testament to McDonald. He's pretty impressive for a 38-year-old guy. I think he's done a tremendous, tremendous job with that football team. And the bottom line is, and Vrabel said this after the game, they were the better team, plain and simple. There's no need for us to sit here and dissect it. And, of course, that's our job. That's what we're going to do. But in the end, man, they were the better team. And as I said earlier, they were better than we thought they were.
And I would also add Seattle made the best trade deadline acquisition in the NFL in Rashid Shaheed. And it did make a big difference tonight, but he had the kickoff return for the touchdown in the divisional round, which set that game off. And he had a huge play against the Rams, that 50-yard catch to get the game going. Like, he helped them this year in the regular season. He helped them in the postseason. So, yeah, I think you got to give John Schneider a lot of credit. Guy that built the Legion of Boom, went to 2 Super Bowls.
You make the argument he's the best general manager in the game right now.
And I agree. And he also made the difficult decision to get rid of Pete Carroll, a popular guy that had won a Super Bowl, bring in Mike McDonald. And oh, by the way, get rid of your OC and your quarterback from last year. It was Geno Smith. Bring in a new QB, have Clint Kubiak be your OC, and you win the Super Bowl. So the combination of Schneider and Mike McDonald, they deserve a ton of credit. Like, you're so right, John. They've been slowly building to this for a while. It all came together for them this year. And as much as we sit here and say the Patriots have a bright future and they're so young and all that, can say all that about the Seahawks. They got to figure out their OC with Kubiak leaving, but everything else, all the bright future, you can say the same thing about Seattle too.
No, and that's a credit to McDonald. He recognized that it wasn't working with Ryan Grubb. He had hired Grubb away from the University of Washington. His style of play didn't fit the way McDonald wanted to play. Let's not forget, McDonald coached under John Harbaugh in Baltimore for a long time. He comes from that Harbaugh coaching tree. He coached for Jim at Michigan as his defensive coordinator for a year. The Harbaughs believe in running the football, being physical up front, and playing good defense, and having effective special teams. And he brought that same formula to Seattle. Grubb didn't work for him. He had the foresight to say, sorry, I got to move on. Brings in Kubiak from that Shanahan tree. He did a tremendous job this year with Sam Darnold, who came over from Minnesota. So he had already had experience in that system. I mean, again, and I don't want to sit here and jock John Schneider for the rest of the show, but that's what a good general manager does. That's smart team building. That's what a good coach does. He recognizes what works, what doesn't work, and they move on. And that's my question to you guys. The Patriots have been such a feel-good story this year, and Vrabel is beloved by every guy in that locker room. But we know this is a business. He's going to have to make some tough decisions here. It's going to be interesting to see how all of this is handled now, because you won a bunch of games this season. Coming into this week, coming into the Super Bowl, you had won 17 games. You won 17 games this season. The vibes were good, but now you have to make some tough decisions here. Now it becomes a business.
And I think the question you need to ask yourselves, do you want to be the 2020 Chiefs or the 2021 Bengals? Both teams got to the Super Bowl, right? Had a great run. Both teams got overwhelmed up front in the Super Bowl. Chiefs retooled, improved, got back there, won it a couple of years later. The Bengals still can't get out of their own way, and they're still getting overwhelmed up front. So, like, that's the recent example. That's the difference. And I think, again, if you're the Patriots, you got to be careful of not falling into the trap of, oh, we got to the Super Bowl, we don't have to do that much, we're so close. Like, yeah, you got there, and you are close, but you do have some significant things to do.
Yep.
Exactly, right? And we saw the gap tonight, and I mentioned it earlier, like, Cincinnati's going to get better. Denver's going to be, you assume Bo Nick's going to be healthy all year, so they'll be better deeper in the playoffs next year. There's other Chargers will be better. So, like, yes, you were good enough to get there. Yes, you're good. You are good, obviously, but you do have some significant work to do. And, your offense needs to be better. Your kickoff return game needs to be better. Your defense has to maintain its level at the very least. And again, these are things they can do this offseason, but I think they got to be careful about not falling into that trap about we all we need, because as you said, John, they need a little bit more than what they had tonight.
John, I said to that point, you need a 2007-ish type offseason. I don't know if you have to go out and, load up like they did, but you have to add. And I'm glad you brought up special teams, needing to get better as well. The punt return that they had tonight, that could have completely changed the game. Del Pettis gets the block in the back. You're back at your 20-yard line. You're screwed. So it's, again, the penalties weren't an issue tonight. I think you only had one false start otherwise. So they were clean, but it's the untimeliness of it. And then to your other point, you have to add this offseason.
See, I don't think that's a slippery slope to me, because the Commanders added this past offseason too, and what did it do for them? And that is part of a broader question here. You go back to Will Campbell, left tackle, for example. Do you do what they did? Do you overpay for a Laramie Tunsil and bring in that veteran? And he ultimately did not do enough to help that football team, and they went from the NFC title game to falling flat on their face. So you got to be careful with this adding stuff. You have a good core there. You have a good young core. You have a good group of veterans that are here for at least the next 2 years. Now it's a matter of you have to decide, what do you want to do with your UFAs, and how do you want to use some of that available cap space, and how do you want to address certain positions? Now, back to my point about the feel-good story of the year with Vrabel, it's a business. What do you do with the Stephon Diggs? Do you bring him back? Was he even on the roster tonight? You talk about non-existent, right? So what do you do with the Diggs? Do you bring him back? I mean, he had a good year, but he's not going to get better. He's only going to get worse. His production is only going to get worse. So do you move on from him now while you kind of sort of can, or do you marry yourself to the length of that contract? Do you go out and try to bring in an A.J. Brown if he's available, or Jeffrey Simmons if you wanted to bring in a defensive player? You don't need it. I mean, you have plenty of talent and depth there. But my point is, you're going to have to be very calculated with the moves you make, because at the end of the day, you have enough there. You had enough to get to this point. You have to fix your problems. You have to plug some holes. And in my opinion, it starts up front, both sides of the ball. You need to address offensive tackle. You need to address edge. And then probably wide receiver comes after that.
Yeah, just before you go.
Yeah, sure.
No, I'm saying, I think Bob Douglas is on that list too. You mentioned earlier, it's year 4. Figure it out.
Yeah. And I think you got to ask the question about, like, how much longer does Hunter Henry have as a big part of this offense? Like, Austin Hooper.
He's been saying that the last few weeks.
Yep.
Austin Hooper is a good story, but do you want something better in 12 personnel? And I think, to me, guys, and I kind of piggybacking off what you said, John, I think most of their additions this offseason should be the middle of the roster guys. Like, we talked all year about their lack of depth and, oh no, what happens if they have an injury? That still exists. Like, yes, I want a high-impact edge defender. I want a high-impact pass catcher. I want to add a vet on the O-line. That's 3 legit things. Beyond that, I want to add a lot of depth. Like, you noticed tonight, as much as Jared Wilson and Will Campbell struggled, they didn't have enough confidence to bench one of those guys and bring in a backup. What does that say about the depth on their O-line, too? You know what I mean? Like, that's something that is worth mentioning as well. So, to me, the depth is still, that's not the sexy thing to talk about, but that's still a huge part of what their offseason is going to be. But I think if you asked me a month ago, I would have put O-line like 4th on the list of priorities. Now it's probably 2nd or 3rd. You might even talk me in to 1st, depending on who's available.
Lauren checks back in. She says, I wondered, to Stone's point about the length of the schedule, but how teams now had film on May, they were able to scheme to his weaknesses. Yeah, I mean, and that's a fair point. And we know in coaching that matters. I mean, the more film you have on someone, and look, I say it all the time, give a good defensive coordinator one off season, he'll figure out any player in the league. And so I think going into the season, teams had more of a book on them. But the more you play, and these playoff runs are great, but to Lauren's point, defenses do catch up and defensive coordinators do get more of a book. She says, my thoughts on May, I think he was hurt for a long while and probably felt like he needed to do more than he usually does. What percentage of that do you guys put on McDaniels? Well, look, I think you're right. And we can all agree now, based on what he said tonight and what we saw, that he was probably hurt. He was definitely hurt going into tonight, and he's probably been hurt for a little while now. But the other part of this is, again, for me with McDaniels, it comes back to the game plan. I thought that the plan sucked, plain and simple. For a guy that I hold in such reverence, and this is going to give the anti-McDaniels crowd some fodder, including my fellow Boston boy, Joe Murray, guys that were anti-McDaniel hires in the spring. These guys have fodder tonight, and rightfully so. I mean, I don't know what they were trying to do on offense, John. I've been a football coach 32 years. I'm watching them, and I'm thinking to myself, early on, I said to him, I like that they're actually coming out and running the football and trying to take it to them, even though that was their strength defensively, stopping the run. I like that they were doing that. But then they inexplicably, in a 3-0, 6-0 game, go away from it. It didn't make any sense to me. Your bread and butter for most of the season was your running game, despite the fact that your numbers didn't reflect it. But I think at the end of the day, man, I don't know what his plan was tonight. And we're used to seeing gadgets in the playoffs from them. Didn't seem like they had anything like that in. I thought their halftime adjustments weren't good at all. This is a team that made good halftime adjustments all season. I didn't see it tonight. I thought they looked even worse up until the Hollins touchdown. I thought they looked even worse on offense than they did in the first half. So I think a lot of this falls on him in terms of the plan.
Yeah, and I would add, like, I don't understand why Travion Henderson wasn't returning kicks all game. I don't understand why Ramondre Stevenson wasn't used more as a pass blocker, especially when they were getting pressure with 4. I think there should have been more underneath routes. There should have been more screens. Again, the headline and the key reason they lost this game was that their offensive line got dominated and May did not play well and he missed open guys. But I think Vrabel, McDaniels, not their best night. Again, I disagreed with Vrabel not having Henderson on kick returns. I disagreed with him not going for 2 after that first touchdown to try to cut it to 19-8. It wasn't their, again, they've had a terrific season and they're a great pairing going forward and they're the guys that you want. It's just not, I don't think anybody on the offensive side of the ball from playing or coaching can look at it and say they had a good night. Unless you guys can think of someone that I can't, I don't think anyone. Defensively, like Zach Core, he had a good night. Defensive players, for the most part, had a good night. Their run defense broke down a couple times, especially on outside runs. But other than that, had a really good night. Offensively, I can't look at anybody, coaching or playing, and say they had a good night.
So on McDaniels, real quick, third down was a huge problem.
You don't
tonight.
have to go quick, dude. We got time.
Since I haven't. They were 6 to 15 on third downs, and at one point they were 2 to 10. I thought, particularly on second down, and I said this to you early in the night, they were screwing themselves on second down because now you're putting yourselves even further behind the chains. I thought the play calling overall on third down was just brutal tonight in general. 6 for 15 is terrible, and I think that's on McDaniels. I also want to go back to Zach Kerr, but I think you had something.
Well, I wanted. Let's just use that as a segue. Yeah. I wanted to ask you guys, what do you do with him? Because he did a great job. He did a tremendous job this year. But what do you do with him? Do you leave him do you elevate him to your defensive coordinator next year, or do you allow Terrell Williams, now that he's healthy, to come back into that role, and Kerr goes back to being inside linebackers coach? I mean, what do you do? If I'm Zach Kerr and that's the direction that Mike Vrabel wants to go in, then I put out my feelers. I mean, does Clint Kubiak have a defensive coordinator lined up in Vegas? Bottom line is, the guy did a really good job, and he deserves an opportunity to coordinate a defense in this league.
He coached well enough for them to win a Super Bowl, just flat out. Yeah. And the defense played well enough. And I would say, Terrell Williams, his one game of the year, that Raiders game, I thought he was pretty good too defensively. That was more the offense didn't play well, but that was one game all the way back in week 1. I would stick with Zach Core as a defense. And if you want to make Terrell Williams an assistant to the head coach, give him a special title, some sort of quasi promotion, that's fine. And it sucks that Williams had an illness and that's the reason we're having this conversation. But I also think Zach Core just did a terrific job as well. And the defense, and I think you guys would agree, they got better under Core. Early on, there were times they were slow to adjust under Zach Core, and you were like, okay, they kind of got to get rolling on this. And then as the year went on, he really found his groove, and they got better and better and better to the point where you go on the road in the AFC Championship game and you allow 7 points, and then you play well enough to win a Super Bowl against a really good offense overall. So it's tough. I would stick with them. It's just kind of a shitty situation because of the way it comes about. Just like if I was Terrell Williams and you stuck with Zach Kerr, I might consider going somewhere else. I think, unfortunately, whichever guy they stick with, the other one might try to leave.
So I'm of the mind, sort of like a player, you shouldn't lose your job to injury, but it's not like he had mono. He had cancer. So Can you trust the fact that you're going to have him for a full season next year? I think you have to have some serious discussions.
I don't think you can base his job status on that, man.
But I'm saying,
and him and Vrabel are close. They're friends.
They work together in Tennessee.
Yeah.
I mean,
but having that much of an uncertain future, and knowing that Zach can go out and start looking for jobs if he wants to, that's going to be a very delicate balance, I think.
I think if I'm Mike Vrabel, the way I frame this is, I go to Williams and I say, look, you can become assistant head coach, senior advisor on defense. You can be the overseer on defense, work directly with Kerr, put the plan together, and then he calls it. And I would put that out there and see if he's interested in that. And then if he's not, then you have a decision to make. I think it's going to be a tough decision either way. Relationships are a big part of this. He has good relationships and close relationships with both of these guys. I do think, and I will say, I think it's kind of hard now to move away from Zach Kerr. I think he did a really good job to the point where I think, as much as I hate seeing Coach T get Wally pipped here, I think he deserves a shot to be the defensive coordinator moving forward. We'll see what Vrabel wants to do. Look, it's been a fun ride, and it's been easy this year. You finished 17-4. It's been easy. But you're going to have some hard decisions to make this offseason, both in the in terms of the coaching staff and the roster. So that loyalty, that love for your team, that unity, all that stuff we need, all that stuff's going to get tested this offseason because, as I mentioned earlier, it is a business. Lauren checks back in. She says, I felt like every time Pats had 3rd and short, it was a 10 to 15-yard pass down the field instead of crossing route or back released, although they did put the back out a lot tonight. Yeah. Plenty of opportunities for steady chunk plays, but couldn't execute the small stuff. Yeah, like pass pro. It's kind of a problem when your left tackle is olaying the guy that's on him because he got beat so badly on his first step.
Yeah, and it's tough because like you look at where this team is, and like I said before, like they got here, but there is a gap between where they are and what they need to be. And John, you mentioned like the tough decision. Stone, you said before like a 2007 level off season. I would say more like a 2003 level off season where they had won a championship before, but then they regressed and like, all right, we're going to target
that. Not to cut you off, that is legit right there. That's when you know you're a Patriots guy because
was that the Corey Dillon year?
No, that was the year after.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So that was when they got a high-priced guy in Roosevelt Colvin. They took kind of a chance on Rodney Harrison that was a home run, and then they had a great draft with Ty Warren and Asante Samuel and Tully Bantakane and Dan Copen. Like, it's not as important an offseason as the last 2 years because you got May 2 years ago and you got Vrabel last year, okay? But it is a pivot point. Like, it is one of those off seasons where if you do a good job, then you can elevate into that point of being able to win a Super Bowl. But if you don't, then you're going to be one of those teams that is good and is a playoff team, but isn't quite at that level. So, like, I would look at, like, can you have a 2003-ish level off season? Or if, for more recent Patriots fans, a 2012, 2013 level, off season where you bring in a Jones and a Hightower in the draft, something like that. Like, it's just something kind of like you need some impact players, but you also need to build out the middle depth of this roster here too.
Yeah, and I think that's a tremendous point, man, because they didn't bring in Corey Dillon until the following offseason. Even after they won the Super Bowl, they brought him in because if you remember in that Carolina Super Bowl, Antoine Smith was still your running back. But you bring up a great point, John. You added the right guys that brought that veteran championship caliber experience to your locker room that taught those younger guys, Brady and some of those young receivers, that taught those guys how to win. I think that if I'm Mike Vrabel, if I'm looking at this objectively, that's the direction you need to go in this offseason. Now, it's harder to find those guys in today's NFL than it was back then. They're not that easily available, but a good veteran or two on both sides of the ball that can bring along some of those young guys, I think is going to make a huge difference. Look, I don't know who the guy might be, but if you decide we're moving on from Jalen Hawkins, we're not going to bring him back, bring in a veteran safety that's been around and been a good player that might be on the back nine, but could be a nice fit next to Craig Woodson that can not only still play, but can help him develop and help your defense on the back end. Again, Hawkins had a really good year, and I hope they do bring him back. But that's a great point that you bring up. I think that's what this team needs. And I asked Vrabel after the game, I said, how much are you young guys going to take from this? What are they going to learn from it? And, like he said to me, he thinks that they can learn a lot from it, and then that's the hope. But now, what can Vrabel and this coaching staff learn from it, right? Because that's really what it comes down to. It's nice that you got there. As he said, it's not about getting here. It's about getting here and winning. Well, we're going to find out a lot about what they think of this team this offseason.
Yeah, and I think go ahead, Kevin.
No, I'm just going to say, before it kind of slips my mind, John, you said it was easy this year, and it was. We talked about the schedule a lot coming up next year. They're going to have adversity throughout the season. That's where it was most easy this year. Yes, it was all kind of lovey-dovey in the locker room. But when they're sitting at 2-4 this year, what's that going to be like? That's what I'm more curious to see, how this team kind of handles all of this year. As
I think that's a great point, Kevin. We haven't seen that yet.
Yeah.
Especially during
Yeah, no, and I like the worst it got this year, guys. They were 2-2 at the end of September. That was the worst it got, and I agree, Kevin. Totally. Like then they won that Buffalo game, and then they have New Orleans, they have Tennessee, they have Cleveland, all very beatable teams. They beat all of them. Would it have looked a little different if they had lost that Buffalo game? I'm not saying they wouldn't have been a playoff team, but like, would it have looked a little different? And one other like last thing I'm kind of keep thinking about is from a coaching staff perspective they didn't do a good job with extra rest this year. Lost week 1, lost coming out of their bye, lost tonight after 2 weeks off, and they didn't play well early in that Cincinnati game after having 10 days off after Thursday night football. It could be a coincidence. It could have more to do with the roster, but that's one of those little things that I think next year with a more difficult schedule, you're going to have to take advantage of when you have a bye week or when you have 10 days off Thursday night football or you want to come out and win week 1. Like that, just little kind of things like that I think are worth examining this offseason.
Well, it's odd too because Vrabel tried to take care of guys. John, when we were at training camp, he was talking about it.
Yeah.
Like you and I were standing side by side at a press conference, and he was talking about resting guys. That was in August. So to your point, they got to manage that better. But I am very curious to see how they deal with adversity throughout the season. I mean, even the Buffalo loss at home this year, when we were in that locker room post game, they were happy, but they weren't down.
The message was, we gave it away,
Yes.
but we still believe in each other. We know that our coaching staff's going to get it back on track.
Right.
We're going to be fine.
Right.
That was the message, and they were right. It turned out to be fine. They didn't lose again until tonight.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
But I'm again, and there's a fine line here, right? You don't want to be negative either, but I am curious to see how do they handle if they start let's say 2-4 next year. How do they handle that? I know we got a couple minutes left here. Real quick, Kevin checks in. He says, "Do you guys think that the coaches should have considered continuing to play Lowe and Brown over Campbell and Wilson?" John, I think that's a great question.
Yeah.
And this goes back to your point earlier about having depth. Do you think that they ever considered maybe making that change tonight and playing those two guys?
Yeah, and I think it's kind of the point I made earlier. What does that say about their confidence level in those guys when your left side of the offensive line is getting smoked and you still won't put either of those guys in? Like I thought Lowe did a decent job.
Restricted free agent as well, so I'm assuming he's probably not going to be back.
And I thought Lowe did a decent job when Campbell was injured this year, but they didn't want to make that move tonight, and I think that speaks to their confidence level in those guys. And frankly, I think especially in Wilson's case, I think it was a mistake tonight. They should have benched him.
So I don't think a head coach would operate this way. But could Vrabel just see Campbell as his boy and not want to do that to him?
No, I don't think so. I think that's a valid
not
point.
in the Super Bowl.
I don't think.
Yeah, I would hope
not
not.
in the Super Bowl. But I'm going to say this, and I only say this because I've been around him. Will Campbell's a sensitive dude.
Oh God, yeah.
He's a very
He hears
proud.
everything.
He hears everything. He's a
Yep.
very proud guy, but I will also say I think he's also a very sensitive guy from the standpoint of it's not that he doesn't think he should be criticized, but he's sensitive to the fact that he hears everything and he responds to everything. And I think, in my opinion, like he made some comments after the Houston game where he didn't like the fact that they were helping him in the first two playoff games.
I
And he
remember
felt
that,
he could
yeah.
handle those guys one-on-one. Now, you can look at that and say, man, this dude's delusional, but the reality is he's a very proud young man, but that can't creep into reality either. He wasn't good in the playoffs. He's going to need to be much better moving forward. If they need to help him, they're going to help him. So Mr. G. Fetty checks in. He says Matt Collins had a decent night, but that's all I can say about that side. I think we would all agree. He also says, I was irritated when McDaniels made substitutions in the first half. Henderson came in for Stevenson, and Travion had very concerning issues with the running game tonight. I know we got about a minute left here, but Travion Henderson underutilized down the stretch. I for the life of me, cannot understand why he wasn't used more.
Yeah, especially in a game like this where it was good weather, an aggressive pass rush, like would have been a good night for the screen game. I mentioned the kickoff return thing. That's something they got to also look into. Like they need to get the ball in Kyle Williams and Travion Henderson's hands more next season.
Yeah, no, I was surprised he wasn't used more in the passing game. And Kyle Williams' best play of the night was helping, stop a streaker. So there's that.
Lauren checks in here for the final comment of the night. She says, as much as I can be tough on this Pats team, I'm so proud. I'm so proud to be a Pats fan, and I enjoyed this season immensely. Enjoyed all the stuff from all of you guys at NEFJ. Thank you, Lauren. We appreciate you and your support. You are the best. All right, John Lyons, final thoughts here on tonight and this season.
Yeah, well, look, it's been a pleasure doing these shows with you guys, and we did them all the way till February. I don't think any of us thought we would be doing them till February. So it was a wonderful season. It was a lot of fun. It's a shitty ending, I know, but it's a young team. They have an opportunity to keep this going. But as we said before, we got a pivotal offseason coming up. And last thing, got to take your hats off to the Seahawks. They earned it. Great team and deserving champion.
I'm going to use the same one I've used for the last month. I hope fans enjoyed this. I know tonight sucks. We're all still fans. It's crushing, frankly. But this run was so unexpected. We joked 3 months ago, hey, we might have to cover a Super Bowl. We didn't believe it. Here we are. So this was remarkable. Remember it for what it was. I do still think this team is going to at least push for this type of run in the future and for years to come. There's a good young core here, but take this season for what it was and enjoy it. This was a hell of a ride.
It's a hell of a ride. It was a great season despite the way it ended. None of us thought they would be here. Let's not kid ourselves. The fact that they got here is remarkable. The Patriots are back, and I'm going to be a little bit more bullish on them next year than some people. I know that the schedule is tough, and I know that they may not win as many games, but I think the AFC is still wide open. I think that we could see them back in the Super Bowl in Los Angeles next year. I don't think it's a stretch. I think that they'll be among the favorites in the AFC going into this upcoming season. But the bottom line is, it sucks that they lost and they're 6-6 all time in Super Bowls now. But at the end of the day, it was one hell of a season, and the Patriots are back, and I think they're here to stay. Again, it all comes back to what you do this offseason. It'll be an interesting one, but I think it's going to be one where you're going to see some change, and I think you're going to see some change for the good. That will do it for this episode of the Patriots Pulse Super Bowl 60 postgame show. For John Lyons, I'm John Serenitas, and for Kevin Stone, I'm John Serenitas. By the way, John, real quick, you're on from 1 to 3 with KJ Carson, correct?
Correct. Tune in to WEEI for 2 more hours of misery.
That's it. So tune into WEEI to catch John. He'll continue to break the game down, and Tom Carroll will be joining him as well from out here. So that will officially do it for the Patriots Pulse post-game show for this season. For John Lyons, Kevin Stone, I'm John Serenitas. Thank you guys for a great year. We'll talk to you guys soon. Peace.
See ya.